stop the presses, hold your horses, call your mom, shut the door, hide your kids, hide your wife, because today, Rob is going to be talking again about Pokemon. So yes, I am once again going to be discussing Pokemon and the franchise due to some crazy news and a little bit of a controversy in this video. And of course, you know, all joking aside, the whole preface to this is, as a lot of you guys who are familiar with Rule of 2 Review know, I'm not a Pokemon fan. I'm not a Pokemon guy. I haven't played the games. I don't really have any aspirations to play the games. I'm just a game fan and a Nintendo fan, and somebody who knows that Pokemon is a big deal. And there are games coming out this year for the Switch, which kicked off this controversy. There's another game coming out next year. A lot of you guys who are fans of the channel, of course, also like Pokemon. I've got friends who like it. My girlfriend likes it. So even though I don't really know about it or really care too much about it, it is still interesting what's happening, and I care about stuff happening when it comes to Nintendo and the Switch, of course. And there's no doubt I definitely have thoughts and opinions over this story. Now, before I get too much deeper into this conversation, I do have to say one thing, give a little bit of a shout out and some credit to a friend of mine, a fellow YouTuber, someone who you guys obviously know about, John, who is also Spawnwave Media, of course. He posted his video this morning, where he actually did a great job kind of breaking down this story and giving a lot of the details. He seems pretty familiar with Pokemon, and also went over just a big story about what's going on here. And it was really helpful to me, as a non-fan who isn't immersed in the Pokemon community and things happening with it, even as a Nintendo fan. And it's interesting because last night on Twitter, I actually saw a lot of tweets and conversations, and some friends of mine and other YouTubers were talking about reactions to Pokemon news and stuff happening with Pokemon. And there's people obviously on one side, other people on another side, people happy, people upset. And I was like, man, something is happening with Pokemon here. And I was a little bit busy, so I wasn't able to do any research. And I was like, I'll just figure out what it is later. And that's when I then saw John's video this morning, and I was like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay, I see. I may not be a Pokemon fan, but I'll tell you what, I actually do have some thoughts on this. So the real kind of crux to this situation, the meat of the conversation, has to do with people's reactions to kind of a reconfirmation that the Let's Go Pokemon games specifically, Let's Go Pokemon Pikachu and Eevee, are apparently being designed on purpose to be pretty easy and pretty casual. And this recent reaction came from an interview that one of the main guys who are behind the Pokemon games, I don't know his name, guys, so sorry about that, but one of the main developers or somebody behind them had an interview with Famitsu Magazine, and then Nintendo Everything actually translated a lot of the interview. And that's also what John discussed, and I'm going to link John's video as well as the Nintendo Everything translation below, and I recommend you guys watch that video and read all that good stuff. I'm not going to pull any quotes like I normally do because I'm just not a Pokemon guy. I don't really care to do so. But anyway, the whole point is, this interview happened, and he basically confirmed, like, yeah, what we're doing with the Let's Go Pokemon games, I'm going to paraphrase it here, is we want it to be easy. We want it to be open and inviting for all types of players. We like it to be a casual experience. You know, Pokemon Go has been this huge, outrageous, major success. We've made a ton of money with Pokemon Go. And so maybe we can even also rope in some of those Pokemon Go players by incorporating elements of that game into the Let's Go games. And hey, maybe some of those people don't have a Switch, and maybe they'd want to buy a Switch just to buy the Let's Go games, and everyone's having a good old Pokemon party. You know, again, that's just me paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he's saying, doubling down on how they're making Let's Go Pokemon an easy, casual experience. And of course, diehard Pokemon fans and people in the community are not really happy about this. They feel like it's a betrayal to the Pokemon series and the Pokemon name and all of this stuff. And, you know, in a lot of ways, it's understandable for sure, and I'll get to that in a minute, but that's kind of what's happening. People are reacting pretty harshly, I guess, to this decision by Nintendo and the Pokemon development team to make the Let's Go games this easy and this casual. Now, when you think about it, the business model definitely makes sense. When you think about what marketing and business is like, trying to make this new Pokemon game and borrowing elements from their crazy successful Pokemon Go, it makes sense. It's not inherently a stupid decision, absolutely. But I also, like I said, I understand why people are upset at this news and the words coming from this interview. You know, I'm overall of two minds on this thing, which I am with most things. I like seeing both sides to any conflict or argument or discussion. And I am of two minds on this, as a non-Pokemon fan. On one side, I absolutely do understand and sympathize with the Pokemon fans, the diehards, who are upset about this decision and this change in what seems to be happening with these games. I can even relate, man, because even a couple of years ago with my own favorite franchise, I went through something kind of similar when Nintendo revealed Metroid Prime Federation Force. And it was like, this is not the Metroid game we've been waiting for. This is not the game we want. This does not resemble our Metroid experience. It didn't even have freaking Samus in it. I mean, there were so many problems with it. Granted, it turned out to be a pretty good game. I've discussed that. It's not really a terrible game. But it was something where I was like, oh, this isn't what it was supposed to be. And so I understand that feeling of betrayal. On the other side, I think that you have to consider the fact that a lot of these fans who are upset aren't looking at the whole big picture of Pokemon and what's happening beyond Let's Go Pokemon, and the fact that we're getting that actual core next generation Pokemon RPG next year on the Switch. The Let's Go games are not the be-all end-all of Pokemon. These are just essentially spin-off games that are meant to tide Pokemon fans over until the game next year. I mean, these are spin-off games. They're not calling them spin-offs, but let's be real. That's what they are. And personally, even though I'm not a Pokemon player, I see no harm in that, especially when we already know about next year's Pokemon game. Now, like I said, it's not that I can't understand why people are upset because you want the mechanics of your game to be a certain way, but that patience till next year's game makes all the difference. If we go back to my comparison about Metroid, when Federation Force was first shown, as many people had discussed, the problem with that was we were in the middle of a huge Metroid drought. And to finally get a new Metroid game that was on the 3DS, and we all wanted it on the then Wii U. This is way before the NX and the Switch and all that stuff. We were like, we want a Wii U game. It was on the 3DS, and it didn't have Samus, and it was using these chibi-looking characters, and it was all co-op based, and it had this blast ball sports mode. And it was doing all these things, and it's like, this isn't how Metroid is supposed to be. And the problem was, because we had no other hint at anything else as far as a true Metroid experience goes, any sort of game with a Metroid name on it that also had Samus in it, which, I mean, think about how crazy it was to make a Metroid game without Samus. And spoiler alert, she does show up at the end of the campaign, but it's not a Samus Metroid game. You know, that was the problem. That was a problem. There was no promise of a solid future for the Metroid franchise for Metroid fans. And when we look at the Let's Go situation, no matter how casual or non-casual this game turns out to be, no matter how good or bad it is, and if diehard fans like it, love it, or hate it, at the end of the day, Nintendo knew that they can't make the same mistake again. It's why they revealed Metroid Prime 4 and Metroid Samus Returns for the 3DS at the same time, at the same E3, because they knew that the promise of the future would help smooth everything over and show fans of that franchise, hey, we're listening, we care, we know what you want, we're giving you a couple of things in this franchise to keep you excited. And that's exactly what they're doing with Pokemon. And that was a very, very smart decision. And even though I'm not a Pokemon fan who doesn't have a dog in this fight over how the game looks or plays or feels, as a game fan and somebody who's a fan of many different franchises, I can still relate. I can understand exactly what's happening here and why it's controversial, but why it also makes sense. And so, Nintendo saying, hey, we're making these Let's Go games for this year. This will be a fun little distraction. They're spin-off games. Like I said, I don't care. And anyone says these games, as far as I can see, are spin-offs. This is a fun little distraction, but we're giving you the goods next year. 2019, the next core console, next generation Nintendo Switch. Pokemon RPG that you've all been waiting for, that's on its way, and it's coming next year, and you can be excited for it. And I guess, as a non-Pokemon fan, I don't really understand why people are so out for this game, or so out for blood, and so upset about it, and can't let it go, that Let's Go Pokemon seems to be pretty casual, and doing some different things compared to a normal Pokemon game. Because it's... I mean, I used to work at a GameStop, so I've seen how many weird spin-off Pokemon games have been made. Like the Coliseum game, the Gale of Darkness game, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium, I think, right? Or I mean, there's so many things. There's another Hey You Pikachu. There's been a lot of spin-off Pokemon games in the past. So it seems like the idea of what the Let's Go games are really is just falling in line with how they've always made and released Pokemon games. Yeah, there are like the normal colored games like your reds, your blues, your greens, your emeralds, whatever coming out all the time. But between there's also been the occasional spin-off game. And that's as far as I can see what the Let's Go games are. And when I, you know, hear these words from this interview and I see them translated and I hear what he's saying, it's like, well, he's basically telling us that these are just more spin-off games. Like, so who cares? You're either into it or you're not. And if you're not, that's fine, because you don't have more than another year to wait until the game you truly want is coming. If Nintendo revealed Metroid Prime Federation Force at that E3, and then later in that Direct also said Samus Returns is coming, or Metroid Prime 4 is coming, we'll tell you about it later, that would have made all the difference in the world. It might seem trivial and like not a big deal, but we're all game fans and Nintendo fans. We get it. That would have made the difference. Hell, just the Metroid Prime 4 logo last year was enough to get us excited and happy. And Nintendo, I'm beating a dead horse and repeating points at this point. Nintendo basically just did the same thing. They were like, hey, let's go this year, next RPG next year. Bob's your uncle. There you go. There's all the Pokemon goodness you need. And so at the end of the day, I think that's probably really all I have to say on this. You know, I can't go too much deeper because I'm not invested in the series and the story and the gameplay mechanics, you know? I mean, we have a good idea of what they're changing with, like I said, the battling, the world, the gyms. They're changing some things. They're dumbing it down. They're making it a console version of Pokemon Go. Okay, what are you gonna do? You know, to me, I just see it at surface value, and I understand what's going on, why these games are spin-offs, why the game that we all care about is coming out next year, and hopefully they all just turn out good. And I feel like a lot of people, I'm just going to wager a guess here, I think a lot of people who are upset about the Let's Go games are still going to pick them up and play them, and I wouldn't be half surprised if most people still end up enjoying them. I mean, Nintendo doesn't make bad games, and I know that this is not exactly Nintendo, it's like the Pokemon or Game Freak or whatever, but the Pokemon games, I've never really heard about people complaining about them. It seems like they're always pretty good. Even the average ones are still seen as pretty good in the community, as far as I've seen. If I'm wrong, you guys can correct me, and that's cool, but as far as I've seen, they've never really messed up a Pokemon game either, so I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt with the Let's Go games, and I'm curious to see how people react once these games finally come out, man. I bet a lot of people are going to change their tune and be like, hey, these are actually pretty fun. I like these games. Thanks, Nintendo, and whatever. So those are my thoughts. Those are my opinions on a franchise I don't really play, but it is interesting to discuss and talk about. I think it's a pretty curious controversy, so you know my opinion. Now I want to hear your opinion. I'm sure most of you guys are fans and experts of Pokemon, so your perspective will be a little bit different and more interesting than mine because you know what it's all about. So what do you guys think? Are you on the side of being angry about these games and the changes that they're making? Or do you not care? Maybe you're even actively excited about them? Whatever you think and feel, share it below. All opinions are welcome here as always, and that is it for me. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.